A brutal anonymous letter exposes discrimination at a local store, pushing its CEO to go undercover as a rookie worker to see the truth for himself. What he finds is alarming. A racist manager repeatedly targeting a young black employee with humiliation and false accusations. As tensions rise, the CEO tears off his disguise in a jaw-dropping reveal, exposing the toxic system that nearly destroyed an innocent teen's future. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. The Atlanta summer heat was merciless that Tuesday afternoon. Richard Vaughn hurried from the convenience store to his black Mercedes, already thinking about the 3 o'clock board meeting that would determine their company's expansion into Tennessee. He started the engine, backed out, and was halfway down Peachtree Street when he heard it. "Sir, sir," a voice called from behind him. Richard glanced in his rearview mirror to see a young man in a Summit Market uniform running after his car, waving something in his left hand. The kid was sprinting through the blazing heat, sweat streaming down his face, his right hand wrapped in white medical bandages that caught Richard's attention even from this distance. At the red light, the young man caught up, breathing heavily as he approached Richard's window. "You dropped this back at the store, sir. I saw it fall when you were getting in your car." Richard's hand went to his back pocket, empty. The young man awkwardly held out Richard's wallet with his left hand, the expensive Italian leather one his wife had given him, containing $700 in cash and everything important. His bandaged right hand hung carefully at his side. "Thank you," Richard began, reaching for his money to offer a reward, but the young man was already stepping back. "Just doing what's right, sir. Have a good day." Before Richard could ask about the injury or say another word, the kid jogged back toward the store, disappearing into the heat shimmer of the parking lot, favoring his wounded hand. Richard stared after him for a moment, struck by the simple honesty of the gesture and the fact that this young man had run through scorching heat to help a stranger despite being injured. Then the light turned green, traffic moved forward, and within minutes the encounter faded into the background of his busy day. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Richard was in his corner office on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower, reviewing quarterly performance reports. Summit Market was thriving. 300 stores across the Southeast, profit margins up 8%, customer satisfaction scores at an all-time high. He leaned back in his leather chair, satisfied with the numbers spread across his mahogany desk. His assistant knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege earned through 15 years of flawless service. "Mr. Vaughn, this was left at reception this morning. No name, no return address." She handed him a plain white envelope with his name typed on a standard label. Inside, a single sheet of paper, also typed, with no signature. "Mr. Vaughn, you need to know what's really happening in your stores. Store 25 on Peachtree is a perfect example. Manager Caleb Morris treats employees differently based on skin color. Young black employees face constant harassment, impossible standards, and threats of termination for minor mistakes that white employees make without consequence. Maria Lopez in customer service can verify this, but she's afraid to speak up because Morris has made it clear that troublemakers don't last long. There's a young man there, Ethan Brown, who recently injured his hand helping a coworker who was being harassed. Instead of being praised for his selflessness, he's been targeted even more severely, mocked for his appearance, called clumsy, and worse things I won't repeat here. The injury has become another excuse for cruelty. Your company preaches equality and opportunity, but some of your managers are creating environments of fear and prejudice. If you truly care about the values Summit Market claims to represent, you need to see this for yourself. But don't announce your visit. The behavior changes when management knows they're being watched. Someone who cares about justice. Richard read the letter 3 times, his satisfaction with the quarterly reports evaporating. Store 25 on Peachtree, he knew that location. It was the same store where he'd bought that cola 3 weeks ago, where some young employee with a bandaged hand had chased his car to return his wallet. Ethan Brown. He leaned back in his chair and stared out at the Atlanta skyline, his mind racing. The letter's accusations were serious: discrimination, harassment, abuse of power. And now he had a face to go with the name, a memory of selfless integrity despite personal injury. Richard had built Summit Market from a single-family store inherited from his father. He'd started at the bottom, stocking shelves, working registers, cleaning floors after closing. He knew what it was like to be at the mercy of unfair managers, to need a job so desperately you'd endure almost anything to keep it. The decision formed slowly in his mind. If he wanted the truth, he'd have to see it for himself. 2 days later, Richard Vaughn officially went on vacation. In his place appeared David Harris, a 45-year-old man looking for part-time retail work. His expensive suits were replaced by khakis and polo shirts from discount stores. His Mercedes stayed locked in his home garage, replaced by a 10-year-old Honda Civic purchased with cash. Store 25 looked different from behind the employee counter than it had as a customer. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher, the 8-hour shifts on concrete floors more exhausting than he remembered from his youth. Caleb Morris, the store manager, was a stocky man in his 40s with thinning hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. During David's first day, he seemed pleasant enough, explaining procedures, introducing him to other employees. "You'll do fine here, David," Caleb said as they finished the paperwork. "We're pretty easygoing, long as everyone does their part and doesn't cause problems." The first few days passed without major incident. Richard observed typical retail dynamics, difficult customers, scheduling conflicts, the usual workplace tensions. Nothing seemed dramatically unfair. Then the evening shift began, and a young man walked through the employee entrance. Richard recognized him immediately. The same honest face, the same lean build, the same quiet confidence. The kid who had chased his car through blazing heat to return a lost wallet. But now Richard could see the white medical bandages wrapped around his right hand and wrist, slightly yellowed from wear but still carefully maintained. His name tag read Ethan Brown. Ethan showed no sign of recognizing David Harris, and why would he? To him this was just another middle-aged guy trying to make ends meet in retail. But Richard remembered everything about their brief encounter. Now he watched Ethan work with his injury, and what he saw filled him with even deeper admiration. Ethan helped elderly customers reach high shelves without being asked, using his left hand and carefully maneuvering to avoid strain on his injured right. When a young mother struggled to manage 2 crying toddlers while shopping, he entertained the children with silly faces while she gathered her items, never complaining about the awkwardness of using only one fully functional hand. During his break, he shared half his sandwich with a coworker who'd forgotten her lunch, tearing the food carefully with his left hand. "Hey Ethan," called out Marcus, a white employee about Ethan's age, "my register's acting up again. Can you take a look?" "Sure thing," Ethan replied, moving over to troubleshoot the technical issue one-handed while Marcus took an extended smoke break. Richard noticed how much longer every task took Ethan because of his injury, yet the young man never asked for help or complained. It was a small thing, but Richard noticed that Marcus's register seemed to have problems frequently, and Ethan always fixed them without complaint, despite the obvious difficulty. That evening, as the store emptied and the night cleaning crew arrived, Richard began to see the differences the anonymous letter had described, and how Ethan's injury had become another weapon in Caleb's arsenal of cruelty. Marcus knocked over a display of canned goods while goofing around with another employee. Cans scattered across the floor, rolling under shelves and into adjacent aisles. "Oops," Marcus laughed, making no move to clean up the mess. "Gravity, man. Gets me every time." Caleb emerged from his office, surveyed the scene, and shook his head with an indulgent smile. "Come on, Marcus, be more careful. David, can you help him get this cleaned up?" But when Ethan accidentally bumped a customer while carrying a box of inventory to the stockroom, his injured hand making it difficult to grip properly, apologizing immediately and helping the customer steady herself, Caleb's reaction was swift and harsh. "Brown, what the hell was that? You can't be stumbling around customers like some kind of crippled gorilla." The words hit the air like twin slaps. Richard felt his hands clench involuntarily, but he forced himself to remain calm, to observe rather than react. Ethan's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sorry, Mr. Morris, I'll be more careful." "You better be. Maybe if you weren't so clumsy you wouldn't have that busted hand in the first place. We can't have employees who don't know how to act around decent people." That night, Richard lay awake thinking about the casual cruelty of those words, the way they had been delivered like a routine correction. The next day, he paid closer attention to the small interactions, the subtle patterns of behavior that might be invisible to a casual observer but formed a clear picture to someone looking for them. When Sarah, a white college student, arrived 15 minutes late for her shift, Caleb barely looked up from his paperwork. "Traffic's rough this time of day," he said sympathetically. When Ethan arrived 10 minutes late the following day, Caleb made a show of looking at his watch and marking something in a notebook. "This is the second time this month, Brown. We need reliability here, not excuses. Maybe that hand of yours is affecting your brain too." "Yes, sir, I'm sorry. My grandmother fell, and I helped her to the doctor. Everyone's got family problems, and everyone's got injuries from doing stupid things. The question is whether you're professional enough to handle them without affecting your job performance." Richard watched the exchange, noting how Ethan's shoulders tensed, how his jaw tightened, but how he maintained respectful silence in the face of the public humiliation. The pattern continued throughout the week. White employees received friendly reminders about minor infractions. Black employees, and Richard now noticed there were only two others besides Ethan, faced public criticism, written warnings, and increasingly impossible standards. But Ethan bore the worst of it, with constant references to his injury used as both insult and excuse for additional harassment. The real revelation came during the week when Richard finally learned the truth about Ethan's injury. He was restocking shelves near the employee break room when he overheard Maria Lopez talking quietly with another employee. "I still can't believe what he did," Maria was saying, her voice filled with emotion. "That customer was screaming at me, calling me horrible names because I couldn't process his expired coupon. He was getting more and more aggressive, backing me into a corner." "What happened?" the other employee asked. Ethan stepped in. The guy was twice his size, and obviously looking for a fight, but Ethan positioned himself between us and tried to calm the situation down. "When the man shoved me, Ethan caught me, and that's when the guy grabbed a bottle from the display and swung it at Ethan's head." Richard's blood ran cold. Ethan threw up his hand to protect himself, and the bottle shattered against the wall behind him, but the broken glass. Maria's voice broke. There was blood everywhere. He needed 12 stitches and damaged some tendons. The doctor said it might never heal completely. "Did Caleb do anything about the customer?" Maria's laugh was bitter. "Caleb apologized to the customer for the misunderstanding and gave him a gift card. Then he wrote Ethan up for escalating a customer service situations and told him to be more careful about his appearance, while the hand healed because injured employees made customers uncomfortable." Richard felt sick. This young man had been injured protecting a coworker from assault, and instead of being supported, he was being punished and humiliated for it daily. That afternoon, the breaking point came. Richard was working an evening shift when he noticed unusual activity in the stockroom. Caleb was having hushed conversations with Jake, the assistant manager, and both men kept glancing toward the front of the store where Ethan was working register 3, struggling to scan items quickly with his injured hand. Around 9 p.m., as the store was winding down for the night, Caleb announced that inventory was short in the stockroom. Specifically, several cases of expensive energy drinks were missing from a shipment that had arrived that morning. "I need everyone to stay late tonight while we figure this out," Caleb announced to the remaining staff. "Someone made a mistake, or worse, and we're going to get to the bottom of it." Richard felt a chill of premonition as he watched Caleb's eyes fix on Ethan. The investigation was swift and brutal. Caleb questioned each employee individually, but his questions for Ethan were different, accusatory rather than investigative. "You were working inventory this morning, weren't you, Brown?" "Yes, sir. I helped unload the delivery truck." "Must have been hard work with that busted hand of yours. Probably made you resentful, having to work so hard while other people have it easy." "No, sir. I was just doing my job, and you had access to the stockroom all day." "We all did, Mr. Morris. It's part of our job. But you were specifically working in that section where the energy drinks are stored, even with your disability." Richard watched the setup unfold with growing anger. The questions were designed to establish both opportunity and motive based on Ethan's injury. "Ethan," Caleb continued, his voice taking on a tone of disappointed authority, "I'm going to ask you directly. Did you take those energy drinks? Maybe you figured the company owed you something extra because of your hand." "No, sir, I absolutely did not." "You're sure? Because I know things have been tough for you with medical bills and all. And let's be honest, that hand makes you less valuable as an employee. Maybe you thought you deserved a little compensation." The room fell silent. Richard could see the other employees shifting uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact, others watching with expressions that suggested they'd seen this kind of thing before. Caleb sighed heavily, as if the situation caused him great pain. "I want to believe you, Ethan. I really do. But the evidence points in a certain direction, and I have to think about what's best for the store and the other employees. What evidence? Ethan's voice rose slightly, desperation creeping in. What evidence points to me? The missing inventory, your access to the stockroom, and frankly your attitude lately. Plus that hand of yours has made you clumsy, unreliable. People who can't do their jobs properly sometimes look for other ways to make ends meet. Richard felt rage building in his chest. This was character assassination disguised as investigation. I want to give you one more chance to tell the truth, Caleb continued. Because if I file this report as theft, it goes on your permanent record. It affects your ability to get other jobs, to build a future. And let's be honest, with that hand you're going to have a hard enough time finding work as it is. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. Mr. Morris, please. I need this job. My grandmother, she's on a fixed income and I help with her medications. I would never jeopardize that by stealing. Please, just check the security cameras. They'll show I didn't take anything. Caleb exchanged a glance with Jake and Richard caught something in that look, a flicker of conspiracy that confirmed his worst suspicions. Unfortunately, there seems to be a technical problem with the cameras today. The footage from the stockroom is corrupted. Isn't that right, Jake? Jake nodded solemnly. Yeah, the system crashed around lunchtime. Lost about 6 hours of footage. The lie was so blatant, so perfectly timed that Richard almost stood up and confronted them immediately. But he forced himself to remain still, to let this play out so he could see just how far Caleb would take this injustice. So you see, Ethan, we don't have video evidence either way. It comes down to trust, and frankly your recent behavior and limitations haven't earned you the benefit of the doubt. Richard looked around the room at the other employees. Most were staring at the floor, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. But Maria Lopez, the customer service representative, was gripping her hands so tightly her knuckles were white, tears forming in her eyes as she watched the young man who had protected her being framed and humiliated. Does anyone else have anything to say about this situation? Caleb asked the room. Anyone see anything unusual today? The silence stretched on. Maria opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, fear and guilt warring on her face. All right then, Caleb said with finality. Ethan, I'm suspending you pending a full investigation. Turn in your name tag and uniform shirt. You can pick up your final paycheck at the end of the week. Mr. Morris, please. The decision is made, Brown. And let me be clear, I'll be making note of this incident in your employment file. Any future employer who calls for a reference will hear about this situation. Good luck finding someone willing to take a chance on a disabled thief. Richard watched Ethan's face crumble. The young man who had run through blazing heat to return a stranger's wallet, who had risked his own safety to protect a coworker from assault, was being framed as a thief, his reputation destroyed, his future jeopardized, all because of the color of his skin, his injury, and one man's prejudice. As Ethan slowly unpinned his name tag with his left hand and began to unbutton his uniform shirt awkwardly, Richard made a decision that would change everything. Wait, he said, standing up from where he'd been pretending to organize inventory. Before you do something you can't take back, Caleb, maybe you should be more careful about your accusations. Caleb turned to him with irritation. David, this doesn't concern you. Get back to work. Actually, it does concern me. See, I know Ethan didn't steal those energy drinks, because I've been watching him for weeks now. And I know you're lying about the security cameras. The room went dead silent. Caleb's face flushed red. Excuse me, who do you think you are to question my management of this store? Richard reached into his wallet and pulled out his business card, his real business card with the Summit Market logo and his title clearly printed. I'm Richard Vaughn, I'm the CEO of Summit Market, and I own this store. I've been working here undercover for 2 weeks, watching you create a hostile work environment based on racial prejudice and using this young man's injury, an injury he got protecting one of our employees from assault, as another excuse to torture him. The card fluttered to the floor between them. Caleb stared at it as if it were a live grenade. That's impossible. Mr. Vaughn, he hired an actor to take his place at last week's board meeting. Is that your theory, Caleb? Richard's voice was cold, controlled. Or maybe you think this is all some elaborate prank. Richard pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Janet, it's Richard. I'm at store 25 on Peachtree. Can you conference in Tom Morrison from security? I need him to access our surveillance system remotely. Caleb's face had gone from red to ashen. Mr. Vaughn, I can explain. Explain, what? How you called a young man a crippled gorilla for having difficulty with tasks because of an injury he sustained protecting our employee. How you used his medical condition as grounds for harassment. How you just tried to frame an innocent employee for theft. Richard's voice rose with each accusation. Because I've been watching Caleb. I've seen it all. The phone conversation continued. Tom, I need you to access the security footage from Store 25, today's date, stockroom cameras, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Also check the system logs to see if anyone tampered with the recordings. Richard kept his eyes locked on Caleb as he waited. The other employees watched in stunned silence, afraid to move or speak. And when was that deletion authorized? By whom? Richard's expression darkened. No authorization from corporate. The deletion happened locally, from the store manager's computer. At what time? He hung up and turned back to Caleb. Funny thing about corporate security systems, Caleb. They keep logs of everything, including when someone uses their administrative access to delete footage at 4:30 p.m. today, just 20 minutes after you accused Ethan of theft. Caleb started to stammer a response, but Richard cut him off. But here's the really interesting part. Before you deleted the footage, Tom was able to recover it from our backup servers. And you know what it shows? It shows Jake taking those energy drinks to his car during his lunch break. It shows you watching him do it. And it shows both of you discussing how to pin it on Ethan. Jake, who had been trying to edge toward the exit, froze like a deer in headlights. 23 years, Richard continued, his voice carrying the weight of profound disappointment. That's how long I've been building this company. 23 years of trying to create opportunities for people, trying to build something decent and fair. And you've been using my stores as your personal playground for harassment and discrimination. He turned to address the room. For those of you who don't know, 3 weeks ago, this young man, he pointed to Ethan, who was standing motionless with shock, chased my car through 90-degree heat to return my wallet when I dropped it in the parking lot. His hand was already injured then, already bandaged, but he didn't let that stop him from doing the right thing. He wouldn't accept a reward. He said he was just doing what anyone should do. Richard's voice cracked slightly with emotion. But you know what? Not everyone would do that. Most people would have kept walking, kept the cash, figured it was their lucky day. But Ethan ran through that heat with an injured hand because it was the right thing to do. And this is how you repay that kind of integrity. By using his injury, an injury he got protecting one of our own employees, as a weapon against him. By trying to destroy his reputation with lies. He walked over to where Maria Lopez was sitting, still gripping her hands, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. Maria, I know you wanted to speak up earlier. I know you've seen this kind of treatment before. You wrote me a letter, didn't you? An anonymous letter telling me what was happening here. Maria's eyes widened with fear and surprise. She nodded, her voice breaking as she spoke. I should have done it sooner. After what he did for me, the way he got hurt protecting me, and then to watch him be treated like this every day. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Richard said gently. Tell everyone what you've witnessed. Tell them what you wrote in that letter. Maria looked at Ethan, her voice shaking as she began to speak. 3 weeks ago, a customer attacked me. He was screaming, calling me horrible names, backing me into a corner. Ethan stepped in to protect me, and when the man shoved me, Ethan caught me. That's when the customer grabbed a bottle and tried to hit Ethan in the head. Ethan threw up his hand to protect himself, and the bottle shattered, cutting him badly. Her voice grew stronger, anger overcoming fear. Ethan needed 12 stitches and damaged tendons in his hand. The doctor said it might never heal completely. And instead of being praised for protecting me, instead of having that customer banned from the store, Caleb apologized to the attacker and gave him a gift card. Then he wrote Ethan up for escalating the situations and has been using his injury to humiliate him ever since. She turned to face Caleb directly. I wrote to Mr. Vaughn because I couldn't stand watching what was happening anymore. Ethan gets treated completely differently because he's black. He gets written up for things that other people do without consequences. I've seen him called names, humiliated in front of customers, given impossible tasks made even harder by his injury, and then criticized when he can't complete them perfectly. And this isn't the first time someone's been accused of theft with no evidence. Richard nodded gravely. Thank you, Maria. Your courage in writing that letter started all of this. He turned back to Caleb, whose face was now a mask of desperate panic. You're fired, Caleb. Both of you, Jake too. Security will escort you from the premises, and you're banned from all Summit Market locations. We'll be conducting a full investigation, and if we find evidence of criminal activity, we'll be pressing charges. But Richard wasn't finished. He faced Ethan, who was still holding his uniform shirt, looking overwhelmed by the rapid turn of events. Ethan, I owe you an apology, not just for what happened here tonight, but for allowing this environment to exist in the first place. This is my company, and these injustices happened on my watch. Mr. Vaughn, you don't need to. Yes, I do. And I want to do more than apologize. I want you to know that Summit Market is going to cover all of your medical expenses related to your injury, past, present, and future. We're also going to cover your grandmother's medical expenses for the next year. And we're going to establish a scholarship program called Summer Rising, because that's what you did. You rose to help someone on a summer day, when it would have been easier to do nothing, even though you were already injured. Ethan's eyes filled with tears he was trying hard not to shed. Sir, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, but I hope you'll consider staying with Summit Market. We need people like you, people with integrity, people who do the right thing even when no one's watching, even when it costs them something. Richard turned to address all the employees. I want to make something clear to everyone here. This company was built on the principle that everyone deserves dignity and respect, regardless of their background, their race, their physical abilities, or any other characteristic. What happened here tonight is not who we are, and it's not who we're going to be going forward. If anyone experiences or witnesses discrimination or harassment of any kind, you have my personal phone number to report it directly to me. Over the following weeks, the changes at Store 25 were dramatic. A new manager was brought in, a woman named Patricia Williams, who had worked her way up from cashier to district supervisor over 15 years. Employee morale improved immediately, sales increased, and customer complaints dropped to near zero. But the most significant change was in Ethan himself. The young man who had been hesitant and deferential began to show the natural leadership qualities that had been suppressed by months of harassment. He helped train new employees, resolved customer conflicts with patience and skill, using adaptive techniques for tasks made difficult by his injury, and became the person others turned to when they needed help or advice. The company also provided Ethan with physical therapy and occupational therapy for his hand. While it never fully healed to its original strength, he learned to adapt, and his colleagues learned to see past the injury to the remarkable person underneath. 6 months later, Ethan was promoted to assistant manager. 1 year later, he graduated from Georgia State University with a degree in business management, paid for by the Summer Rising Scholarship Program that had grown to serve dozens of students across the Summit Market network. The scholarship ceremony was held at the company headquarters, with Richard delivering the keynote address to the graduating recipients. But when it came time for the students to speak, everyone knew who they wanted to hear from. Ethan approached the podium with the same quiet confidence he'd shown that day when he chased down a stranger's car to return a lost wallet, his right hand still bearing the scars of his selfless act, but no longer a source of shame. He looked out at the audience of students, parents, Summit Market employees, and executives. A little over a year ago, I thought my life was over, he began. I was accused of something I didn't do, by people who judged me based on the color of my skin, and saw my injury as a sign of weakness rather than evidence of my willingness to protect others. I felt powerless, hopeless, like the truth didn't matter. He paused, his eyes finding both Richard and Maria in the audience. But I learned something important that night. The truth always matters. Justice might be delayed, but it's never denied when good people have the courage to stand up for what's right. Ethan's voice grew stronger. Mr. Vaughn didn't have to get involved. He could have filed my case away and forgotten about it. But he chose to see the truth for himself, to risk his own comfort and safety to uncover injustice. Maria didn't have to write that letter, knowing it could cost her job, but she found the courage to speak up for someone who had protected her. That's the kind of leader I want to be someday. He looked back at his fellow scholarship recipients. All of us here have benefited from someone else's courage to do the right thing. Now it's our turn. When we see injustice, we have to speak up. When someone needs help, we have to act, regardless of our own limitations or fears. When the choice is between what's easy and what's right, we have to choose right, every single time. The applause was thunderous, but Richard barely heard it. He was thinking about that sweltering Tuesday afternoon, when a young man had chased his car through the heat with an injured hand, asking for nothing in return, except the satisfaction of doing good. Sometimes, Richard thought, the smallest acts of kindness create the largest ripples of change. A returned wallet, an anonymous letter born of guilt and gratitude, a decision to see truth instead of assumption. All of it connected, all of it leading to this moment when justice had not only been served, but had created opportunities for dozens of other young people to rise. As Ethan left the podium and returned to his seat, he caught Richard's eye and nodded, a simple gesture of gratitude and mutual respect between two men who understood that doing the right thing is never easy, but always worth it. The benefactor under the summer sun had become a beacon of hope, proving that integrity and justice could triumph over prejudice and cruelty, as long as someone was willing to run toward what's right, regardless of the heat, regardless of the wounds they carried, regardless of the cost.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.